One sunny afternoon, in a quiet town, a restaurant was busy with people chatting and enjoying their meals. A kind waiter named James worked there. James was tall, with a big smile. He was known for being polite and always ready to help anyone who came through the door. One day, a woman rolled into the restaurant in a wheelchair. She was wearing a pretty red dress and had short brown hair. Her name was Mrs. Miller. She looked a bit nervous as she wheeled herself to a table by the window. James walked up to her with a friendly smile. "Hi, my name is James. How can I help you today?" he asked. Mrs. Miller smiled back, but she seemed unsure. "I'd like to have the soup of the day, please," she said softly. "Of course, I'll bring it right out to you," James replied, and went to the kitchen to place her order. While James worked, Mrs. Miller sat quietly at her table, looking outside at the birds flying by. When James returned with the soup, he placed it gently on the table in front of her. "Here you go, Mrs. Miller. Enjoy your meal," he said. "Thank you, James. This looks wonderful," she said, her voice a little stronger now. She smiled as she took a spoonful of the warm soup. As the afternoon went on, James kept an eye on Mrs. Miller to make sure she had everything she needed. He refilled her glass of water and made sure her table was clean. She was enjoying her lunch, and he was glad to see her smiling. After a while, Mrs. Miller finished her meal. She looked up at James and reached into her purse. She pulled out a bill and handed it to him. James took the bill and smiled, but when he looked at it, his face froze. The bill wasn't just money. It was something different. He blinked twice and stared at the paper in his hand. Mrs. Miller smiled softly. "I hope that helps. It's the least I can do for your kindness today." James looked back at her, trying to understand what was happening. James carefully unfolded the bill, his eyes widening as he read what was written on it. It wasn't just money. Instead, there was a note in fancy handwriting. "Thank you for your kindness, James. Here is something special for you. I hope you understand when the time comes." James looked up at Mrs. Miller, feeling confused. I'm not sure what this means," he said, his voice shaky. Mrs. Miller chuckled softly. "Don't worry, James. It will make sense soon enough. Just keep it safe." She winked at him, then added, "I have to go now, but you've been a wonderful waiter. I'm sure you'll understand soon." James felt a strange mix of curiosity and worry. He nodded, not wanting to seem rude, but his mind was racing. What did she mean by that? What was so special about the bill? As Mrs. Miller wheeled herself out of the restaurant, James stood there, still holding the note. The restaurant was quieter now, and James could hear the sounds of clinking plates and murmurs from other customers, but his mind was far away. He slipped the note into his pocket and went back to work, but something told him that this strange moment wasn't over yet. He didn't know it, but that note would change everything. The next day, James couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He even showed the note to his friend Sarah, who worked at the restaurant too. "Sarah, look at this. What do you think it means?" James asked, handing her the bill and the note. Sarah read it carefully, then looked up at James with wide eyes. "I don't know, but there's something mysterious about it. You have to find out. Maybe it's some kind of puzzle. Are you going to keep the note?" James nodded. "Of course I'm keeping it, but I feel like I need to do something with it, like it's not just a note." The next few days passed, and James started noticing strange things happening around him. Small things, like the way people in the restaurant seemed to be extra friendly, or the way his tips seemed to be growing bigger. But what really caught his attention was when he found another note tucked into his coat pocket one evening after work. This one was different. It was shorter, and the writing was in a hurried, messy style. It said, "The answer is hidden in the place you least expect." James felt a chill run down his spine. What did it mean? And where was this hidden place? James couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket, trying to focus on his work. But the mystery was consuming him. Who was leaving these notes? And what did it all mean? That night, as he was closing up the restaurant, a new customer entered. She was a woman in her mid-30s, with bright green eyes and long curly hair. She wore a leather jacket and had a confident, almost daring presence. She wheeled herself confidently into the restaurant, but unlike Mrs. Miller, this woman wasn't in a wheelchair. She was walking, but with a cane. "Good evening," the woman said, giving James a warm smile. "I'm looking for something quiet to eat. Do you have a corner where I can sit?" James, still distracted by the strange notes, nodded and led her to a cozy booth by the window. "Right this way. I'll be right back with the menu." As he walked back to the kitchen, James couldn't help but feel that there was something unusual about this new woman. She had an air of mystery about her, just like Mrs. Miller. When he returned to take her order, the woman looked up at him with a knowing smile. "You're James, right?" she asked. James blinked. "Yes, that's me. How did you know?" The woman chuckled softly. "I know more than you think. The name's Mia, and you're wondering what the notes mean, aren't you?" James froze. How could she possibly know that? His heart started to race. "You've been receiving strange notes, haven't you?" Mia asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. James stared at her. "How do you know about the notes?" Mia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I've been following the same trail. I've been looking for the answer just like you." James was stunned. "You've been getting notes too?" "Not exactly," Mia replied, her voice full of mystery. "But I know about the person who's been leaving them, and I know the game they're playing. If you want to understand it, you're going to need help." She paused for a moment, as if deciding whether to say more. "You're not alone in this. But be careful. Not everyone wants the answer to be found." Just then, a man walked into the restaurant. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with short, dark hair and a stern face. He wore a black jacket and had a scar on his chin. James didn't recognize him, but there was something unsettling about the way the man walked, like he was on a mission. Mia turned her head sharply when the man entered, her expression darkening. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "Well, well, looks like the cat's out of the bag," she murmured. James looked back and forth between Mia and the man. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity and a little fear. Mia sighed. "That's Leo. He's one of them, the ones who want to keep the secrets hidden. He's dangerous, James. If he's here, that means you're getting closer to something big. You need to be careful who you trust." Before James could respond, Leo walked straight to their table and sat down without asking. He looked directly at James. "I hear you've been receiving notes," Leo said, his voice deep and cold. James nodded, feeling nervous but determined. "Yes, I have. What's going on? Who's behind this?" Leo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Mia. "You should leave, Mia. This doesn't concern you anymore." Mia stood up slowly, her eyes narrowing. "I'll leave when I'm ready. You can't control me, Leo." Leo turned back to James. "The truth is, these notes are just the beginning. There are things happening in this town, things you don't understand. But if you want to know more, you'll have to play the game. And once you start, there's no turning back." James felt a wave of confusion and fear wash over him. What game? What truth was he about to uncover? And why did everyone seem to know so much about him? Leo stood up, his cold eyes locking with James's. "Remember this, kid. The answers are hidden where you least expect them, but trust me, you won't like what you find." With that, Leo turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving James and Mia in an uneasy silence. Mia looked at James and sighed. "You've got a long road ahead of you, but I'll help you if you want. Just know that it's going to get dangerous from here." James took a deep breath. He had no idea where this strange path would lead, But one thing was for sure, he wasn't going to give up now. The mystery was bigger than he ever imagined, and he was going to uncover the truth no matter what it took. But what would happen next? James sat there, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Mia was right about one thing: things were getting dangerous. Leo's cold warning kept echoing in his mind, but now he had no choice but to keep moving forward. The puzzle pieces were scattered, and he needed to put them together. Mia watched him carefully, her expression softening. "Don't let Leo scare you. He's just trying to intimidate you," she said, her voice steady. "There are others, people like you, who are trying to find out what's really going on. I'm one of them." Before James could respond, a sudden noise interrupted the conversation. The door to the restaurant swung open, and a man in a hooded jacket stepped inside. He had a mysterious air about him, and the moment his eyes met James's, a strange sense of recognition flickered between them. "Is this where the game is happening?" the man asked, his voice low and serious. Mia's eyes narrowed as she studied the newcomer. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone suspicious but calm. The man slowly removed his hood, revealing sharp features and intense blue eyes. His face looked young, but his expression was one of someone who had seen far too much. "Name's Alex," he said simply. "I've been following the same trail you have, James." James looked at him confused. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything I need to know," Alex replied cryptically. "I've been tracking the notes too. Looks like we're all on the same path now." James felt a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "But why? Why us? And who's behind all of this?" Before Alex could answer, Mia stood up and put a hand on James's shoulder. "This is exactly why you need to be careful," she warned. "Not everyone who's involved has good intentions." James glanced at both Mia and Alex. "So, what do we do now?" Alex leaned forward, his eyes flashing with urgency. "We find the source. We find who's behind the game. And we make sure the truth comes to light. But we need to work together." Mia hesitated, clearly unsure of Alex's true intentions. "I'm not so sure about working with him," she muttered, looking at James. "But I'll help you. I've been on this trail for too long to back out now." James nodded slowly, realizing he was tangled in something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The notes, the mysterious people, it was all leading somewhere, and he was going to find out where. Just then, the door swung open again. This time, it was a young woman around James's age, with bright red hair and a leather backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked around the room, then spotted James, Mia, and Alex sitting together at the table. "Am I late to the party?" she asked with a grin, walking over to them. She had a confident air about her, like she'd been through a lot and wasn't afraid of anything. "You must be the new player," Alex said, his voice calm but not entirely welcoming. The red-haired woman didn't flinch. "You could say that. Name's Lily. I've been keeping an eye on all of you, especially James. I think we're all looking for the same thing." James stared at her, feeling a sense of both relief and caution. "So, you've been following the notes too?" he asked. Lily nodded. "Yep, and I've learned a lot along the way. Some things are clearer than others. But trust me, you don't want to go in blind. You'll need all the help you can get." Mia crossed her arms, studying Lily. "How do we know we can trust you?" Lily shrugged. "I'm not here to make friends, but I'm not here to make enemies either. I just want answers, like everyone else." James felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. Each new person added more questions. But one thing was clear: they were all chasing the same mystery, and he wasn't going to back down now. "So, what's the next step?" James asked, feeling a sense of urgency rising within him. "What do we do now?" Lily leaned in, her voice lowering. "There's a place in town. It's old, almost forgotten. People don't talk about it much, but I've been there. I think it's where the answers are hidden." Mia raised an eyebrow. "What kind of place are we talking about?" Lily's eyes glinted with determination. A place with secrets. It's not going to be easy to get in, but we don't have much time. If we're going to find the truth, that's where we need to go. James stood up, ready for whatever came next. His heart raced with excitement, fear, and the sense that he was on the verge of something huge. He looked at his new companions, each with their own reasons for being there. They were all in this together now. "Let's do it," James said, his voice steady. "Let's find the truth." And with that, the group of strangers, now allies, set out on their next step, knowing that whatever lay ahead would change everything. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it would become. And James had no idea how much longer they could stay ahead of those who wanted to stop them from uncovering the truth. The group left the restaurant together, stepping into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, with only a few cars passing by. James led the way, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He clutched the notes in his pocket, wondering what they might unlock. Lily walked beside him, her leather backpack slung over one shoulder. She pulled out a small flashlight and clicked it on. "The place I'm talking about is on the edge of town," she said, her voice calm but serious. "It's an old train station. It's been abandoned for years." "A train station?" Mia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Why there?" Lily shrugged. "It's not just any train station. People say it was used for something more than trains, something secret. I found a note hidden there once, just like yours, James." James felt a chill run down his spine. "What did it say?" Lily hesitated, her face turning serious. "It said, 'The clock holds the key.' I didn't know what it meant, but I think we'll find out when we get there." Alex, who had been silent for most of the walk, finally spoke. "If this place is as important as you say, we won't be the only ones there. Leo won't let us snoop around without a fight." "Let him try," Mia said firmly. "We're not backing down now." As they walked, James noticed something strange. A man in a dark coat was following them from a distance. He wasn't close enough to hear their conversation, but he stayed within sight, his face hidden in the shadows. "Guys," James whispered, nodding toward the figure. "I think we're being followed." Lily turned her head slightly, catching a glimpse of the man. "Don't stop walking," she said quietly. "He's not just anyone. That's Victor. He works with Leo." "Who's Victor?" James asked, keeping his voice low. "He's one of Leo's enforcers," Lily explained. "If he's following us, it means Leo knows we're heading to the station." "What do we do?" James asked, feeling a knot of fear tighten in his chest. Lily smirked. "We lose him." She quickly led the group down a side alley, her flashlight flickering against the brick walls. The sound of their footsteps echoed, but the man in the coat didn't disappear. He was closing the gap, moving faster now. "Split up," Alex said suddenly. "We'll meet at the station. It's the only way to throw him off." James hesitated. The thought of separating from the group made him uneasy, but there was no time to argue. Mia grabbed his arm and nodded. "Let's go this way," she said, pulling him toward another alley. Lily and Alex darted in different directions, leaving James and Mia to navigate the dark streets alone. The sound of Victor's footsteps grew louder behind them, but James refused to look back. His heart pounded as they ran, turning corners and ducking through narrow passageways. Finally, they stopped in a quiet alley to catch their breath. James leaned against a wall, his chest heaving. "Do you think we lost him?" he asked. Mia peeked around the corner, her eyes scanning the street. "For now," she said. "But we need to keep moving." Just then, a soft voice called out from the shadows. "You're not very good at hiding, are you?" James and Mia turned quickly to see a young boy, no older than 12, sitting on a crate. He had messy blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a mischievous grin. He was eating an apple, completely unfazed by the tension in the air. "Who are you?" Mia asked, her voice sharp. The boy shrugged. "Name's Ethan. I've been watching you guys. You're looking for the truth, right?" James blinked, surprised. "How do you know about that?" Ethan tossed the apple core aside and hopped off the crate. "I know more than you think," he said with a smirk. "I can help you, but it'll cost you." Mia narrowed her eyes. "Cost us what?" The boy grinned. "A promise. You have to take me with you." James and Mia exchanged uneasy glances. "Why would we do that?" James asked. Ethan's grin faded slightly, and his voice turned serious. "Because I know things you don't. About the station, about the notes, about the people chasing you. And because you'll need me." Mia hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but if you slow us down—" "I won't," Ethan interrupted, his grin returning. "Now, let's get to the station before Victor catches up." The three of them disappeared into the night, the mysterious boy leading the way. Meanwhile, in the distance, Victor stood on a rooftop, watching them with a cold, calculating expression. "The game has begun," he muttered to himself, pulling out a small radio. "They're heading to the station. Alert, Leo." The trio followed Ethan through the winding streets, his small figure darting ahead like a shadow. James couldn't shake the feeling that this boy knew far more than he was letting on. They finally reached the abandoned train station, its crumbling facade and rusted tracks looming eerily in the moonlight. The station had a heavy stillness about it, as if time itself had forgotten this place. Ethan led them inside through a broken side door, his flashlight illuminating dusty benches and cracked tiles. At the center of the room stood a giant clock, its hands frozen at exactly 3:15. "This is it," Ethan whispered. "The clock holds the key." James stepped forward, his heart pounding. "What do we do?" Ethan pointed to a small compartment at the base of the clock. "Open it." James knelt and pried the compartment open, revealing a stack of old letters. Each was sealed with a wax emblem resembling a compass. He pulled one out and unfolded it, his eyes scanning the handwritten words. "It's a journal," he said softly. "Someone was documenting everything, the notes, the people, the secrets." Before he could read further, a loud bang echoed through the station. Victor stepped into the room, his cold eyes locking onto them. "You've gone too far," he said, his voice menacing. Mia stepped in front of James, her jaw clenched. "We're not backing down, Victor. The truth deserves to be known." Victor smirked, reaching into his coat. "You think the truth will set you free? It'll only destroy you." Just as tensions reached their peak, a new voice cut through the silence. "Enough, Victor." Everyone turned to see Leo stepping into the room, his presence commanding and calm. He looked at James with an unreadable expression. "You found it," he said simply, nodding toward the letters. James stood, clutching the journal. "What is this? Why were you trying to stop us?" Leo sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "Because some truths are better left buried. These letters detail the actions of a secret group, a group that manipulated this town for decades. If the truth comes out, it could cause chaos." James shook his head. "People deserve to know. We deserve to know." Leo stared at him for a long moment before finally nodding. "You're braver than most. If you're determined to share the truth, I won't stop you. But know this, the road ahead won't be easy." With that, Leo turned and left, Victor following reluctantly. The tension in the room lifted, and James looked at Mia, Ethan, and the journal in his hands. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We have a lot of work to do." Over the following weeks, James and his new friends carefully released the information in the letters. The revelations shook the town, but they also brought healing and accountability. People began to rebuild their trust and find ways to move forward. Moral of the story. The pursuit of truth is often challenging and fraught with obstacles, but it is a necessary path to justice and growth. Standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity, requires courage, teamwork, and resilience. In the end, truth has the power to bring change, no matter how difficult the journey may be.